I think one of the other big stories, undertold stories in this election, people talk a lot about TikTok, but people don't talk enough about YouTube, right? YouTube is I think the second largest media property in the world now.
So how much money
Um,
did you all spend on YouTube? I mean,
yeah,
just
it's
roughly.
$60 million,
Yeah.
enough to be the largest political advertiser by a large stretch.
Yeah.
And there were weeks, Amy, and in states where we spent more money on digital platforms like YouTube and others than all of the Republican advertisers put together.
So let's dig into that for a minute, because that's also one of the takeaways from this last election is that Democrats got outplayed in these new platforms, whether it's TikTok or whether it's YouTube, and that the Democratic Party hasn't figured out how to talk to these voters in the spaces they live in, the way they talk. So I'd love for you to sort of address that, what you saw in there, and how you're thinking about it going forward.
Yeah, it's a $1 billion question, and it's the right one. I mean, look, I think there's no question on social media on the social media front that we certainly didn't crack the code. And hopefully we can talk more about some of the mistakes we made and things we're trying to fix. But if I could go back in time, and boy, would I like to do it again. Like, give me another chance. Is that we did spend a lot of time. Our largest investments in 2023, when money was certainly much tighter than it was in August of 24. But our largest investments were around social media and understanding. A lot of smart people across the system, on our team and lots of other teams, were ringing the alarm bell and saying, we're getting crushed here. And so it was a big animating concern. And so, we jumped on that early, but it's also the type of thing where I wish I could have raised more money earlier in the cycle to do even more investments on a longer time horizon, because I think one of the things that you get to is advertising is a very useful tool, but it's not a cure all, right? It's not. You can't solve every problem, and you have just a limit on the amount of impact you can have with advertising in an election. I think there was an independent analysis done by some of our donors in 2020, and they thought our $150 million ad campaign in that cycle was worth just under half a point on the margin. And so if you extrapolate that out and you consider for diminishing returns a bit, $500 million, you're hoping for a point or a point and a half on the margin. And I had to go around and give these numbers to donors in real time during the election, say that's what we're shooting for. And on the one hand, people want to say, $500 million for a point to a point and a half on the margin, and that's kind of some of the expectation setting that I think people need to wrestle with, is that having an impact in presidential elections, you're really trying to move at the margins. Now, I for one think it's worth it, but I do think that there's that is just one of the realities. And so when you get back to the social space, it's a longer burn. So coming in with late money on in the influencer space, those relationships take time, and the relationships are really important. And we did see, and I think this has been reported and people covered this, there was obviously a big difference between the social media ecosystem, when you had Biden at the top of the ticket, and then you got a ton of energy come in around Kamala Harris, and I think recency bias has obscured the fact of how great she was coming out of the gate, and how much energy and ebullience there was around her, and her strong performance right out of the gate. But I think the number one place that donors and activists and all of us are focused right now is, how do we show up in these platforms better? How do we build stronger relationships over time? how do we move through these spaces? And there's a lot of components of that, right? There's, the message you're trying to drive is important, but the candidates you have, the people that you're going out there are important, and the policies and the things you're speaking to are important.
Yeah, my my
Yeah.
sense on YouTube, and I'd like to get your perspective on this, and part of the challenge I think in trying to figure out how to message on some of these platforms, whether it's YouTube or TikTok, is that so much of the conversation is organic around Donald Trump that it wasn't that it was pure advertising where you would see a B-roll or something like that show up in your YouTube feed, but that the shows in which, or the programs in which these younger men, especially, were spending time on, talked about Donald Trump a lot. Right. So he became, the advertising actually wasn't any about amount of money or an actual ad tested message. It
Yeah.
was people are actually talking about him and saying things like, oh, he showed up at did you guys see him at McDonald's with the
Yeah.
French fries? Right. So, how much of that is, unique to Donald Trump? And how much of that is that Republicans maybe did break the code or crack the code on how to operate in this new space?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I don't certainly don't have the definitive answer,
Yeah.
but I would say, you're interesting. It's interesting to see what's happening now, right? We're starting to see a shift. You're seeing more energy on the left, and so, they're folks talk about, TikTok especially, but some of these other platforms as a vibes machine, like,
Hmm.
and again, elections, this, we can zoom out a bit and say that this is true of elections too, which is, how well do candidates fit the moment, right? And so, Trump was certainly a showman and one of the great manipulators and storytellers, and there's many things. And we talked about this when it was CNN in 2016, the way he got CNN to roadblock his rallies. So he certainly is a uniquely talented character in that space, and that's part of it. There's also the fact that, the driving concern um, has been, we had runaway inflation, and you had a very unpopular incumbent administration, and nothing drives people quite as insane as the cost of everything going up.
Right.
And so that's the atmosphere too. And so the organic content was against us. The real measure of whether someone can crack the code and control the weather
Hmm.
is if the macro swings are actually against you. Can you force your way through it? I'm pretty skeptical, and I think some things we're seeing now where, I think I heard the other day that, the Midas Touch got more downloads than Joe Rogan. So watch out, and so I think that the, harnessing the moment, matching the moment, meeting the moment's a big part of it. That's not to say that we don't have lots of work to improve and to catch up with the Turning Point USA, efforts. I think as usual the answer is like it's a little bit of everything.
Right. Right.